And now joining us to discuss the election is Lisa Haugaard, the executive director of the Latin America Working Group. She's spearheaded advocacy on human rights and peace issues in Latin America for 2 decades. And Lisa, looking at this election, this was a stark choice. Santos wanted to go with the peace and conciliatory. His opponent, more kind of a hardline approach. What do you make of the results?
Well, that's exactly right. It was a choice that Colombians had between peace and continuing the war. President Santos campaigned on a platform of continuing the peace process and bringing it to a successful conclusion. And his opponent followed in the footsteps of ex-President Alvaro Uribe with a much more hardline approach. He waffled a bit on the peace process as he got pushed on that, but he was much more for continuing the war. And Colombians voted for peace.
But his opponents also kind of had this attitude that the FARC leaders will probably get some political power, probably not as much punishment for their crimes. Did that sell very well with the voters? Obviously not if Santos won, but is there much merit to his argument?
There certainly are some voters who did not want to see the FARC enter the political process, but all wars end with guerrillas, rebels entering the political process if they go through negotiated settlement. And there are many different armed actors that have violated human rights in Colombia. The guerrillas, absolutely, the paramilitaries on the right, and the army itself. And so there's some tough trade-offs that Colombians have to talk about regarding truth and justice, but I think they can make those trade-offs and figure it out.
What kind of impact does this have on the peace talks, this election, do you think?
Well, for a moment, it was a bit of a cliffhanger. For a moment, it seemed like in the first round, Mr. Santos lost the first round to Mr. Zuluaga, so that seemed to really put a bit of obstacles in the peace process. But with this second pretty decisive round, with Mr. Santos having a 6% advantage over Mr. Zuluaga, it really reaffirmed and gave momentum to the peace process.
The talks, though, seem to be just kind of taking forever, and they seem to be mired on this point or that point, and it seems like reaching consensus just point by point seems to be taking forever. Can this speed the process along, do you think, at all, or no?
I have a lot of faith in this peace process. This is a 50-year war. There are many, Colombian history is littered with failed peace processes, but both sides have really stuck it out with a lot of endurance and a willingness to compromise. And this process is considerably past the halfway mark. We're now at the fourth round, talking about victims issue, which is probably the toughest. But after that, we're talking demobilization and really kind of more practical issues. So it's really advancing, and it does require a lot of patience on everyone's part, that's for sure.
Well, Lisa, we've run out of time, but thanks so much for coming in. Certainly appreciate your perspective. Thank you.